Hey there, and welcome to episode 37 of the Unapologetic Mompreneur podcast, where today I am chatting with the amazing Emma Gray from Rainbow Hunting. Emma is a grief and life coach who is also a Royal Marine widow, a mum of two bereaved children, a former wills and probate solicitor who is passionate about sorting the home admin and processing grief emotions so that we are better prepared to weather life storms and live our best lives now. I was super honoured and humbled to connect with Emma on a recent network meeting, and we just connected right away with our stories and the things that we both of us have been through. And what she does is just truly incredible, and her journey and her story that has led her to where she is today, and the incredible, amazing way that she is supporting so many people out there to not just over process grief and pick their lives back up again, but just make sure that all of that sad admin, that life administration admin is sorted, and that we're prepared just in case of facing major illness or just in case of that death and trauma happens. I know that this is not an easy topic for some people to listen to, and so I do want to share with you before we dive in that it may be triggering for some of you, that if you are going through a traumatic time right now, if you have had any type of illness or lost a loved one, this may be an episode that is going to be hard for you to listen to. And so I want you to be prepared about that in advance, because we are going to be talking about my backstory, about my cancer story, my recovery from breast cancer and picking my life back up again, and diving into Emma's incredible, humbling story about losing her husband and dealing with all of the Sadmin and moving on and dealing with the grief and processing all of that, and how she has learned to grow her life, both for her and her children, around the grief, and take everything that she has done and journey through in her life to turn it into something incredible that is her Rainbow Hunting organization, and how it helps other people just prepare and have all of that Sadmin in place and grow around the life around grief and processing grief. This is one of those topics that just is not talked about enough, and it is something that we are so often so scared to talk about, but it is one that needs to be done and a conversation that needs to be had, and especially as mums with online businesses, families to take care of, and a lot of us running our businesses, our kids are very young still. And so knowing that we have all of this sorted in place just in case or preparing for the worst can really help take away some of that weight, and knowing that we are set and sorted. And so if you are going through it right now, or you've been thinking about sorting out your Sadmin but don't know where to start, this is an episode that you are going to want to listen to. Like I said, it's some very deep topics that we are covering in here, and it may be hard for some people to listen to, but if you can, I highly encourage you to, because the message that Emma is sharing and the tips and strategies she shares for growing life around grief, and how to get started in dealing with things like your wills and power of attorney and everything else, so that you know that you are sorted as a family and that you've done everything you can to support your kids just in case the worst should happen and come across, whether that is trauma, illness, or losing a loved one. This is an incredibly powerful episode, and she has got so many amazing tips, strategies, and encouraging messages to share with you, and highly do recommend giving it a listen. So without further ado, let's dive in and join me as I chat with Emma Gray all about Sadmin and her amazing journey, and the incredible way, the most humbling way that she is now taking her journey to help and support other people. Welcome to the Unapologetic Mompreneur, the podcast for mums with an online business who are ready to take back their time, home, business and self, so they can restore the balance and thrive, both at home and at work, without feeling like they have to choose between the two. I'm your host, Sarah Dew, life and biz coach for mompreneurs. I'm also a mum, stepmom, wife, introvert, breast cancer survivor, and your mentor for making a change for the better. I've learned how to go from surviving to thriving and unapologetically create a business I love and the life I want for me and my family without worrying about what other people think. And now I'm here to help you do the same. Because being an unapologetic mompreneur doesn't mean that we're selfish or that we don't care about others. It simply means that we are not afraid to show up as our true, authentic selves, to step into our purpose, do what we know is right for ourselves and the ones we love, and take the steps we need to take to make our dream life and business a reality. Join me each week where I'll be sharing all of my best tips and strategies, plus the occasional dose of tough but gentle love to help you feel empowered, motivated, and confident to take action so that you can become the mum, wife, biz owner, and woman you know you are meant and deserve to be. So, are you ready to unapologetically create a business and life you love? Let's do this. Okay, hey Emma, welcome to the podcast.
Excellent. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
I'm super excited to have you on and dig into all things Sadmin. Now, before we dive in and start, just in case anybody hasn't met you before, do you want to just share a little about who you are, what you do, your story, how you've got to where you are now?
Yeah, oh gosh, yeah. I never quite know where to start on my story. So I was wills and probate lawyer for my sins, and bizarrely, I used to always apologise for it, and now I'm not a lawyer anymore. I'm like, hey, I was a solicitor, and that's kind of cool. I did loads of exams, and I really knew my stuff. And my husband was a Royal Marine, and so kind of we'd always known that he had a risky job and all the rest of it. And me being a Wilson probate lawyer, we were kind of always quite sorted on what I call like the Sadmin. Um, but I never, ever, ever anticipated that he would get an illness that would mean that he'd die slowly at home. I just always thought that he had so many risky hobbies, and he did loads of crazy things like cycling the entire route of the Tour de France in the same time frame as the professionals and skiing down mountains and all the rest of it, that if anything happened to him, he'd either be blown up or he'd do something stupid. And sadly, in 2013, he got diagnosed with esophageal cancer, but we knew, me and he, that it was terminal from day one, pretty much. The kids obviously didn't. And yeah, long story short, he sadly died in July 2016 when the kids were aged only 6 and 8 years old. And it was amazing because he lived loads longer than I feared that he would live. And the treatment they gave him enabled us to do some amazing bucket list stuff. And we did have the gift of being able to have some conversations, which when people sadly die suddenly, you don't get that at all. I then kind of went back to living life as we had, same house, kids at the same school, going to the same job. Then I slowly started to make a few changes. So I moved my job so I was closer to home, so I'd be closer for the kids. And then I woke up one day and realized that it just wasn't working. And it's fascinating, but I often say to clients that grief can put a metaphorical magnifying glass over stuff that's there that you don't realize you need to address. And for me, it definitely put a magnifying glass over a lot of stuff that I carried for years. And one of which is I only recently realized that I have ADHD, and we've got a massively neurodivergent household. And fascinatingly, the grief kind of threw my ADHD out the water. I suddenly felt like the wheels had fallen off, and I was so disorganized, and I wasn't able to do anything. Whereas it hid my younger daughter's neurodivergence, because everyone kept blaming her behavior on the trauma of her dad dying and all the rest of it. It wasn't until last year they went, oh, hang on, and they agreed that we could get her diagnosed, and she's got autism as well as a whole bunch of other stuff. But what happened is I realized that I was doing everything was hard. Work was hard because I was part-time. And so with a lot of my full-time colleagues, I felt like I wasn't coming up to scratch. But I was burning out trying to be the best I could possibly be at work. And then at home, I was often the last mum to collect the kids from the school gates. So a lot of parents can probably resonate with this. Mummy, why were you the last mummy again? And stuff like that. And so I first of all moved house so that we were a lot closer to school, and that's been amazing. And then I just decided, you know what, we had put in place all this admin stuff, and the thing that it gave us was financial freedom, me and the kids. So I suddenly realized I was saving money with no mortgage, and I was like, how many other people with a good pension from my husband, I was like, how many people can do this? We can't necessarily afford to go on holiday every year anymore, but I can definitely survive. So I went to work and said I need time to spend with my children, and I'd moved house to be close to school, and a lot of the stuff that I didn't want to live with on a day-to-day basis I'd put in the garage, and then I woke up and realized I had double garage which was stuffed, and I didn't have the emotional resilience to go through it when the kids were home. So I was like, I need to sort my house out. I need to be a better parent for my children. And I've got enough money to keep me going for a while. And long story short, they didn't want me to go, but I agreed to go on sabbatical, worked 3 months to handle my clients over properly, just in case I didn't go back. Finished, and then literally, I'll never forget this because I'm on a couple of boards. I was in London at a board meeting, and on the underground there was lots of people in masks, and I remember just thinking something really strange is about to happen. There's something really odd about to happen. And literally 2 weeks after I finished my last day of being a lawyer, we went into lockdown, and I was like, oh my good God, like I wanted to spend time with my children, but this is like taking the Michael, like this is ridiculous. And I think a lot of parents might be able to resonate with the fact that I learned I am not able to teach my own children. It's just not a skill I have, especially when my younger daughter turns around and says, but you're not a teacher, why should I listen to you? It's like, you are spot on there, sweetheart. I cannot remember. Or turns around and says, but mummy, why don't you just ask Google? Because Google will actually know the answer. I was like, yeah. Yeah, okay. And then I had a bit of a kind of life crisis, and in the end decided to do a counselling course, which I still haven't finished, because I've subsequently realised I want to be a coach, not a counsellor. So I've got a theory of all the counselling, and I work very therapeutically, but I am now grief and life coach, helping other people with the two things that I'm really passionate about. So one, as you said, is Sadmin. So it's all the sad admin that you have at home, whether it's wills and powers of attorney, or whether it's just the insurances and the paperwork and the utilities and the, like when you're at work, you have a filing tray and a filing system, and in-post comes in here and outpost, and at home you don't have that kind of system in place. You just have a pile of papers in the kitchen. And why not? Because actually, if you want to be organized anywhere and have peace of mind anywhere, it's at home, so that's all about the sadmin. And at the moment I help people with their own sadmin, so sorting it out for their own day-to-day peace of mind and organization, and in case for when we do get ill and die. But I'm also I quite often on a one-to-one basis help people with what I call post-death sadmin, which is like when people die, don't do any of the legal paperwork anymore, but having been a wills and probate lawyer, I know a lot about it. And then the other thing, which I have a lot of one-to-one clients, is about growing life around grief. So it's not counselling per se, because I'm not qualified as a counsellor. It's definitely coaching, but it's about this terrible, tragic event has happened, but it doesn't mean that you can't be happy again. And actually, your loved one would want you to be happy. And Simon said to me, you need to be happy, because the sooner you are happy, the sooner the kids are happy. And at the time, it just felt like this, like all-consuming cross to bear, because I had no idea how to be happy. And I think sometimes talking to someone who's been there, who knows it, and who can just normalize some of the experiences and provide hope that you will feel happy again. And that's where the whole rainbow thing comes in, because it actually comes from back in 2014, so when my husband was alive, and someone asked me how he was, and I can be very blunt sometimes, and I just turned around and said, well, he's gonna die. And she was like, oh my God, we thought he was like in remission. I was like, well, he's a bit better, but he's still got a lot of cancer, and he always will. And she was like, I just don't understand how you can keep going and be so positive. And I said, it's a bit like the weather. So, it can be cold and wet and miserable, and you can feel all alone and like it's never going to end. But actually, you've just got to keep faith, because every storm eventually passes, and you've got to go chase your rainbows, because the sun and the stars are never going to go. They're always there. You just sometimes can't see them. So that's where the whole concept came from. So, yeah, long story.
It's amazing and so incredible and heartwarming, and just, oh my goodness, it's just like, what do you say to that? I mean, the journey that you've been through, and it's just incredible. And knowing that your kids are young at the time when it happened and everything else, and taking everything and your experience of wills and everything, and turning it into something so beautiful that shares that message and gives that support and guidance and that reassurance that to others that you're not alone going through all of that, because it can be such a dark time, and it's one of those topics that nobody wants to talk about. We don't want to talk about it. We're too scared to talk about it. But it's one of those things that just we have to know that it's set and set. And especially when we've got young kids at home. And, for me and those that listening know my story about my own cancer diagnosis when I back in 2016 with breast cancer. And at the time, my boy was only 5. Like, your kids were very young too. And thankfully I got through the other side of it, but it was the biggest shake-up call for me because up until that point, I had no will, I had nothing set. I had life insurance, but that was it. I had absolutely nothing. My husband was pretty set because his work is amazing at everything they have. But it was such a wake-up call, and going through all of it, it's like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about what's going to come and, what the possibility is. And the fact that you've taken that what's that experience that you went through and losing your husband, I can't even begin to imagine. And especially like you say that when they go into the forces in the military, there's always that worry that you just don't expect it then to be something like a diagnosis of cancer instead. And oh my goodness. But to the fact that you've been, and when we met initially a few months back, didn't we, on a networking call, on a call like we're doing now, with because we're those that are able to watch it on the YouTube channel, we're recording this too. And it just clicked and just both resonated so much with each other's messages. And I just think it's just so incredible that you've taken what you've been through and you're now helping other people with it. It's just amazing. And the whole setting up the rainbow hunting concept and what your business has become because of that, and taking everything from experience and everything that that from your past work experience to do this and support others is just, it's so amazing and so touching.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's fascinating because actually one of his biggest worries was he never wanted to be forgotten. And I feel like he's so intimately interwoven into every
Mhm.
part of rainbow hunting that there's no way he ever can be forgotten because
Yeah.
he's pivotal to its existence. But one thing really came to me when you were talking about how young your son was and what have you, and it just reminded me, I run a will challenge that's always free, roughly every 6 months. And the idea is it takes people exactly like us who are relatively young, who've got kids, who think they're indestructible and who have no will, or they have an incredibly out of date will. And they just put it down the bottom of the to-do list because they think it's a tomorrow job. And I don't draft the wills, but what I do is I take them to a place of understanding what their mind monkeys are and what's stopping them from doing it. And the
Mhm.
thing I've learned from it is that it's often what's stopping people from doing it that actually makes it really important. So maybe they've got blended families and they don't know who to leave what to. Well, then they're going to certainly argue if you don't work it out yourself and tell them what's going to happen. Or maybe that it's that you don't know who the guardian's going to be. Well, if you don't know, then no one else is going to have a clue, and it's going to end
Mm.
up going to court because people are going to fight over who's going to do it. And it's better that you do the best job you can for now, with an eye to the fact that you might have to change it at some point in the future, than not having it done. And it is absolutely fascinating because it is nearly always the people who need to do it who put off doing it. But it's not, I always say the legal papers are not, and never in my profession was I not able to get round a legal problem. I always
Mhm.
find a solution. The legality is rarely difficult. Well, it's sometimes difficult, but it's rarely impossible. You can always find a way around it somehow. But what we make it difficult with our thoughts and our emotions, and that's the bit
Mhm.
that I love, is helping coach people on their thoughts and their emotions. And it's fascinating because sometimes the blocks aren't what they think the block is, and
Mhm.
that can be really, really interesting as
Yeah.
well.
Amazing. I think a lot of it, I mean, definitely for me was that and having not done it prior to my diagnosis was just that fear of I didn't want to face that what if, and then if I started talking about it and thinking about it, was it going to happen, and all that stuff. And then I was prompted to do it of like, crap, actually this has happened. I've really got to just face up to the fact that I need to have this. And I was, like you say, young at the time. I was 36 at the time, so I wasn't expecting that, we don't expect it at any age, but it's very young to have to go
My
through
husband
that. And he was
was
similar
38
age,
when he
38.
died.
Yeah, you just don't. You do, and you're right. You said about that the like the bubble of thinking that you're indestructible. And we had that, and mine afterwards. Now we've always said that our invincible bubble was burst and it's never going to come back. And we've accepted that now. We just deal with that every single day. But it is so important to have all of this stuff in place. And although it's terrifying the thought of actually having to do it, once it is done, that peace of mind that comes with it is, especially when you've got children, is incredible.
Yeah, no, definitely. It is just, yeah, so important. It is so important. And it's one of the things I love the most. Like, I'm a big believer that social media is social. So when people message me, I always message them back. And you know, if anybody is listening and they think, oh my God, I need to do this, but I don't even know where to start, people can just message me. Because because sometimes it's just the prompt you need. And I love hearing people's stories, and I love hearing when they do stuff that was really difficult and how they feel after they've done it and stuff. Um, it's, yeah, really amazing.
Awesome. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about how we can learn to grow life around grief, which is, I know, one important part of what you do?
Yeah, so I've run one course which I literally called Growing Life Around Grief, and I will run some more. Um, it involves quite a lot of emotion because I often think that grief can put a magnifying glass over other stuff. So sometimes when our grief becomes quite complex, it's because it highlights other stuff that we've never processed or we've never realized. And it can sometimes, I really believe in post-traumatic growth, you know,
Mhm.
like all the amazing stuff you've done since your cancer, and all the rest of it can produce some amazing stuff, partly because we get to know ourselves a bit better
Mhm.
and who our true, authentic, real selves are. And I think sometimes after a bereavement, it's kind of like two fingers to the world. It's like the worst thing has happened.
Mm.
I can be real me now because
Yeah.
I just don't care. And actually, sometimes there's a gift in that. I often used to say that that was the gift my husband gave me, is that he saw the real me, which is why we had such an amazing relationship. I mean, God, it wasn't perfect. Him putting wet towels on the end of the bed, that used to drive me mad. Apparently, it dries the towel. He didn't see that it made the bed wet, but anyway, we
Oh.
won't go there. Um, but um, but you know, I think that sometimes we can learn a lot about ourselves, and he saw the real me, and then since he died, I started to connect with the real me, hence leaving law, starting my own thing, really embracing the bits about me that make me different, that
Mhm.
actually I used to be ashamed of. And now I'm just like, hey, it's me. I'm nearly always late. It's just the way I work. Actually, if you want me to arrive on time, just lie to me and tell me it's 15 minutes earlier. But then sometimes I'm half an hour early. I mean, I can never be on time. It's somewhere in the somewhere on either end of the spectrum. But I think that also it's about having three new relationships. I think we fundamentally are changed by grief.
Mhm.
I think trauma is really fascinating. There's the most amazing guy called Gabor Mate, and I don't know if you've heard any of his stuff.
No.
And he says that trauma isn't the external event, it's not the car crash, it's not the person dying. Trauma is the internal disturbance within ourselves to what's happened externally, which is why some people can be at the same event and some of them are really disturbed by it and others are quite resilient, because it depends on how internally it shifts us.
Mhm.
And the other person that's amazing, if people want to follow anyone with grief, is to follow someone called Julia Samuel. She's my like amazing guru on grief. And I think she's just like amazing. But she says that pain is the agent of change. And so to
Mhm.
be able to process a grief, you have to be prepared to sit in the pain. But grief can't heal in isolation. So, ironically, what we feel like we need to do when we're grieving is hide ourselves away from the world. And, you know, even just with your cancer, you know, hide away from the world. Don't let people see me at my worst and my most vulnerable and my weakest. But actually, that's the point where you need to be reaching out to people who get it, to people who've been
Mhm.
there, to people who understand. And then I think you've got three new relationships because you are fundamentally changed by the event that's happened. So you have to kind of reconnect to yourself and
Mhm.
have that new relationship with yourself. I think that then when there's death of a person, you need a new relationship with the person, because you don't want to move on, move away, leave them behind. Your grief is really deep because your love was really deep. So you want to have a new relationship with that person so that you can work out how you're going to take them forwards into your new life and what you're going to do to memorialize them, to remember them, to have them accompany you, whether it's a parent, a spouse, a child, a friend, whoever it was, if they were significant in your life, a new way of having their memory continue with you, which is another reason I'm so passionate about the Sadmin, because you can help people with those continuing bonds by the stuff you leave behind. And then the third one is a new relationship with society, because society sees you as the same person, but actually you're often not, you're fundamentally different. Or maybe you just feel stronger in who you were, but society's not going to know where you are on that spectrum unless you establish that new relationship. So I've got a bit of a method that I take people through, that I first of all, always with all my clients, start with looking at foundations. So, sometimes grief can be so complex if we're just exhausted. People don't realize that grieving is exhausted. And then if you're not sleeping properly on top of that, your resilience will be lower because you're just not sleeping enough. And then I tell people a bit about awareness and how important it is to be aware of what's going on, like that magnifying glass I was mentioning. I then talk people through information, so some grief models. I don't really believe in stages and specific models, because grief is as unique as the relationship you have with the person that died, but it can be helpful to normalize things. Then I think we need to take action. So if we sit on our own and hide away, nothing's going to change. And we need to process everything, and whether that's reaching out to a community, getting some therapy, having coaching, making big changes in our life, working out how it's about taking a bit of action. And then I really believe that it's possible to find the happiness and to find the end state. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of my growing life around grief. And I've got a waiting list at the moment, but I haven't got a date for another course just yet.
That's incredible. That is such an important thing and for people to do. And just looking at all, like you said, the three different relationships, that's something that nobody ever talks about, and how, finding yourself again. And I think that is just beautiful about redefining the relationship you have with the one that you've lost, so that you can take them with you. Because so many people just, want, like you said, they don't want to feel like they're leaving somebody behind and losing the memory of them, how they're going to memorialize them. And that is just so important. So I am just so glad that you have got that running. And yeah, I'm sure it's so needed by so many people. That is fantastic. And we are going to link to that in the show notes so that people can go and if they want to, they can sign up for that. Absolutely. So let's dive into a little bit into the Sadmin of how we get started. And just have you got just a few tips of what people can do if they're not really sure what it means, how to get started with it, how to tackle all those papers they've got everywhere? How can they best get started with it?
Yeah, so it's one of those things, isn't it? You have piles of paper, you know what you need to do, you need a will, you need a power of attorney. I think we probably all know what we need to do, which is like will, power of attorney, sort all the insurances and pensions. I mean, who has 6 different pensions from different jobs? When the laptop breaks, are you rummaging around in the papers going, God, where is it insured? Is it on the house insurance? Has it got its own insurance? Like, what happens? Help. And I think that actually it really affects you as a parent, because if you know that laptop is insured, you know exactly where to get the I've got the reason I say it is my young daughter, one of her coping strategies is her screen. So if her laptop breaks, it's punishment enough that she hasn't got the laptop as a safe space for a short period of time. She certainly doesn't need a parent who's going to shout and scream at her because it's £1,000 to replace it. So I've got unlimited accidental damage on it. And it means that when the laptop breaks, I can be the compassionate parent of, oh my gosh, you poor thing, you didn't mean to break it. Are you going to be okay? We'll send it off. It'll get fixed. So yeah, I think we all know what it is that we need to do. And I think that it's natural. I think the first thing we need is self-compassion. It is natural to want to avoid the pain. It's not a sexy thing to do. We're not going to set the world on fire to say, oh, you know what, I'm just going to do some filing today. Woo! It's not really going to get anyone going, is it? I'm just going to go see the lawyer and talk about death and dying in my will. It's not going to jazz things up. So I think the one best ways to do is to find a community that gets it, find community and people, and also to break it down. If you look at the Sadmin in one massive thing, it just can seem so overwhelming. And so when I run my Sadmin course, which is available 24/7, it's an online course, so you can go in, you can watch the modules in your own time. If you want, you can speed me up, although I always joke with people that I talk quite fast, and so I'm not sure they'd want to speed me up. Um, but and I talk people through step by step, and then I give them tasks to do and how to break it down, and I weave in mental health to everything. So even the Sadmin, I start off with foundations of, you're taking on something extra. You're deciding that you want to sort the Sadmin, to think about death and dying. So are you sleeping enough? Are you eating enough? Because if you're going to add something extra to your current workload, you need to make sure you've got the capacity and the resilience to be able to do it. And I always like a party, so I always have a kind of ending to everything, and a kind of finish. Have you finished it all? Have you still got some gaps and all the rest of it? But I think the most important thing is to find people that get it and find other people that want to do it, because we're only avoiding, when you said at the very beginning about thinking you're invincible but not wanting to do it because you don't want to die. Sadly, the only thing that's certain for all of us is at some point we're going to die. And doing all the Sadmin is not going to make it happen any quicker, but it is definitely going to make a tricky time a lot easier. And or we can change the conversation on that, I think the better. Because just because you're doing it doesn't mean that you've got these magical powers that suddenly something terrible is going to happen. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. I think that was definitely the case for me, that I was just so worried that if I started looking at it and talking about it, and it was just that fear. But it is such an important thing to do. And it is so reassuring for me, having already been through one, that round of cancer, to know that we have got that in place and everything. So how would you say, for someone that's just starting on it, what, aside of like finding a community, what's like the top thing to dig into first? Is it the will? And does the power of attorney come as part of that? How do they, if they've got absolutely no idea about that and just find it totally daunting, what can
Yes,
you share with them to help them just sort of
that's
like overcome
really
that a bit?
That's a really good question. So the reason I run my will challenge for free is, and I give away so much information. So many people have told me I'm mad, but it's partly because I'm philanthropic, and as a lawyer, I just believe that everyone needs to do it. And I don't draft the will, so I don't feel like I'm doing anything particularly difficult, but the will is definitely the place, because it is the only legal document that specifies who gets what when you die. There is no other way to specify it. You have to have a will. And if you're happy to pay a lawyer, they will sometimes do will and power of attorney all bundled up together. I sometimes found that used to, and this is where having practice makes it really helpful, but that actually it makes it quite overwhelming. So I used to often have 3 appointments with my clients: an initial appointment to take instructions, send out the draft will, an appointment to see them to sign the draft will, and then take those LPA, the power of attorney instructions, at that second appointment, and then see them a third time for the signing of the power of attorney, because I used to otherwise find it just got really overwhelming. And the other thing that some people don't realize is the difference. So the will specifies who gets what when you die. The power of attorney is the legal document saying who you're going to delegate decision-making powers to in your lifetime if you get poorly or for whatever reason you can't make your own decisions. And I think, this is where with the course as well, and with anything that I do with social media, if people just don't understand a term, they can send me a message. But sometimes it's just the jargon in itself becomes barrier because people don't understand. But yeah, definitely the will and the power of attorney first, and then all the other stuff, the insurances and the utility and the pensions and stuff. And I also always talk about digital legacy, because I don't think we talk about that enough. But that has as much a dual purpose as it does on your death, in that tidying all that stuff up. It was really lovely hearing you speak, because you could almost see the relief in your body that you've got all that sorted. And it is the dual purpose of, it's a handrail for everyone when you're not here, so that's the death bit, but actually it's the peace of mind it gives you now. And we have houses in 6 years, and if I hadn't been organized, that would have been a nightmare moving house. But being organized about the home paperwork can make you a calmer parent. It can make you better at the being another half, being able to run the house and all the rest of it, because you just have the security of knowing yes, it's not sexy, but that everything's sorted.
Yeah, definitely. That was definitely it for me. Once it was all done and nailed, was that even though I was putting it off, I knew that I needed to do it, but I didn't want to. But at the same time, I was still stressing of like, if I don't get this done, then what's going to happen with my boys? How are they going to be sorted? Are they going to be okay? And it was silly because I was putting myself through all that unnecessary stress and that little thing chipping away at my shoulder the whole time of knowing that, Sarah, you need to do this. You need to get it sorted. And now it is done. I know that if anything happens to me, Harrison is sorted. And and I was able to build into it what I wanted to with Oscar as well, because like you were talking about blended families, Oscar's my stepson. I
Mm.
have no blood relation to him, but I've been his stepmom for almost 20 years. That by having that will, because to me, he is my own flesh and blood, that regardless, I love him and see him as much of my boy as I do as Harrison. And to know that by having that will, that there's something in it for him, for me, that I have that connection with as well, that I know that from my view of what I can as stepmom, he's taken care of as well. Even though he's not my son by blood, I can still make sure he's taken care of too. And it really is, and especially as as parents, not just mums, but as dads as well, as parents, knowing that our kids are sorted of whatever happens to the both of us or one or other of us, because we don't know what's going to happen, even to, especially when they're under 18. And like for us, our kids were so young when they went through the traumas they've been through, to know that they're sorted and that peace of mind, just like you said, it just makes home life so much easier to manage. It takes away that stress.
And I think that's why I'm going to use one of your words, but I think that's why I so unapologetically like talking about death and dying,
Mm,
because actually I know that if you don't talk about it, metaphorically speaking, it's as though you're carrying this massive rock around with you all the time.
mm.
No one else can see this weight that's bearing down on top of you. But once you get it sorted and once you deal with it, you're lighter. And that's where I love the rainbows, because you can feel lighter and better able to go out and chase your rainbows
Mm.
and all the rest of it, because you've got the relief of knowing that it's sorted.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that that's what you've called it, because just by the name and the rainbow image just gives people that instant hope, because we all know how we feel when you see a rainbow. We all want to go and look for that pot of gold. It lifts us up. We see it. There's all the colors. Yeah, it just gives us hope. And I think that's such a wonderful way of how you've done it. And it is just incredible. Thank you so much for sharing everything. And I could definitely talk to you so much longer about this, but it's just, I'm just so in awe and just so humbled by what you are doing. And it is so important. And it just gives hope to everybody. And I know it's not an easy subject to talk about. And I know it's something that a lot of people, I was included, still are scared of talking about. And I know it's probably, as an episode for some people, it's going to be very difficult for them to listen to and everything. And so just like wrapping up, is there just one nugget, one thing that you would like to just share as like one final message for everybody before I've got a couple of questions for you as we finish up? But is there just like one final thing you would like to share?
I think my final thing would go back to my point that grief doesn't heal in isolation, and that works for trauma too. And so, even for those who right now are listening, kind of wanting to get to the end, but knowing that they're internally a bit disturbed about what they've listened to, the feelings you're feeling will be much better if you share them. And that's the same with anything, just having that unapologetic confidence to be able to say, I listened to this podcast today, and this is what it was about. And so think my final little gift would be like, however much the pain comes up, sharing that pain makes it so, so, so much easier. And so if you're struggling at all, just remember that, like Charlie Mackelsey with his beautiful book, just it's the courage to ask for help is the biggest gift you can give yourself, I think.
Amazing. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So there's one question that I always ask all of my guests, and I loved your answer. So if you can share with everybody, what does being an unapologetic mompreneur mean to you? And how are you showing up every day unapologetically, both as a mum and as the boss of your business?
Oh my gosh, did I already answer this one?
Oh, there was a little bit in your application because I always like to see what people say, but just share whatever comes to mind. It doesn't have to be the same as that. So
I can't remember what I said before. How bad's that?
that's okay. What does it, when it just pops up, what does it mean to you?
I think the most important thing is to be honest, and sometimes the hardest person to be honest with is ourselves. And I
Mm,
think that's where reaching for help is so amazing, because I believe we don't go to other people to give us the answers. Other people can just help us find the answers inside ourselves. When we find our own answers, that's when it really, really resonates. So So wherever you find your help, whether people are coming to you and your community or whatever they're doing, even if they shared in your community thoughts about what's come up, it's that having the confidence to be honest to ourselves and to other people if we want the support about what it is that we need. And I'd love to know what I said in the
That is amazing. I love that. Let me just have a quick look. I'm sure I've still got it here. Here we go.
Or maybe I didn't even answer it, which would be very me.
You did answer. Here we go. It's being true to myself. It's a gift that came from my late husband dying, waking up and being my real self, not trying to do what I thought was expected and following my heart. Absolutely love it. Wonderful.
Yeah, no, and that is the gift that I said that he gave me, is to actually work out who I really was. And I think sometimes we don't know who we are, and that's okay. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But then maybe that's a time to go and have some therapy or have some coaching and reach out and discover who you are. Because it was one of the questions that really stumped me early in my grief, is someone said, what does Emma like to do? And I'd got so absorbed with being a military wife, then being a carer and being a mum. I kind of had forgotten who I was and what made me happy. And I found that quite stressful, that not knowing. So sometimes it is a project in itself to discover that.
Incredible. Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Emma. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and just the amazing, wonderful thing that you are doing now to help and support everybody as a result of your journey. So just incredible. Thank you so much. Now we're going to make sure that we've got linked in the show notes your course, and you've got a Sadmin quiz it's free for people to sign up for as well. So just to wrap up, do you want to share a little bit about the quiz and just where people can find you and connect with you if they've got questions and they want to reach out and work with you?
Oh, bless you. So the easiest place is at my website, because everything will be there. So that's www.rainbowhunting.co.uk. And the Sadmin quiz. So the idea is that it asks, and it doesn't just ask you about your will and your power of attorney, but it asks questions to see how sorted your Sadmin is. And the average answer is fascinating because it's about halfway through, which means there's people all over the spectrum doing it. And it kind of gets you into my world as well, which is really lovely. And then my happy place is definitely Instagram. But the details for all my course and the free will challenge and the Growing Life Around Grief waiting list and all the rest of it can all be found on the website.
Fantastic. We will make sure that that is all linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for being on here and sharing everything with everybody today. Really, really appreciate it. And I'm just so glad that we've connected. And I know that this episode is going to help so many people. So thank you so much.
It's my absolute pleasure.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. Bye for now. Thank you so much for joining me for another installment of the Unapologetic Mompreneur podcast. If you like what you heard, be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. And if you have a moment, I would love for you to leave me a rating and a review so that other mompreneurs can find this podcast too. Here's to unapologetically becoming the mum, wife, biz owner and woman you know you are meant and deserve to be. I can't wait to chat with you in the next episode. Bye for now.